Thanks so much for joining. We're just going to give it a moment for people to get on the Zoom. In the meantime, just a little housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded. This webinar is being convened by the Voter Protection Corps, a 501c3 organization. We will have an opportunity for question and answer. So please, if you have any questions as we go through the speaker portion of this presentation, please put them in the chat, and then we will take your questions as we go forward. So I think we'll just dive in. We've got a great program for you here today. My name is Quentin Palfrey. I'm the chair of the Voter Protection Corps, and we're at an extremely important moment in our democracy. We're facing unprecedented challenges at the national level. And in just a couple of weeks, we will have the first important state elections of the new administration era. And so today, what we were hoping to do is spend a little bit of time talking about the national landscape. We have a terrific national expert, Norm Eisen, here with us, who will help set the stage for why the 2025 elections are so important and some of what's going on at the national level in terms of the threats to our democracy. And then we will dive right into a conversation about the important elections coming up in Virginia and New Jersey, as well as hearing from the Voter Protection Corps campaign manager. And just give you a little bit of a background on the Voter Protection Corps for those of you who haven't worked with us in the past. Voter Protection Corps is a network of experienced voter protection experts that has sort of come together over the last few elections, focused on making sure that every eligible voter can register, vote, and have their vote count, and also making sure that we are thinking strategically and long-term about how we protect the vote in elections. One of the things that we learned, and I've been involved in voter protection for more than 20 years in a bunch of different presidential cycles. And one thing we learn is that there's a boom and bust cycle, and that we tend as a voter protection community not to think in advance, not to use the lessons that we learned from the past as much as we should. And so the Voter Protection Corps is very focused on making sure that we learn the lessons from cycle to cycle, that we intervene early and effectively, and that we are engaged across a number of different jurisdictions. So while we are very focused right now on mobilizing folks to protect the vote in New Jersey, Virginia, and other elections across the country, we also very much are thinking about the 2026 elections and some of the threats to our democracy and how we can springboard from the activities of this election to move forward into these really critical midterms that are coming up. So with that, what I'd love to do is introduce our first speaker. I got to know Norm Eisen when we were both in the Obama White House. He was very important and distinguished member of that administration in the White House counsel's office. Ambassador Eisen is also the founder and executive chair of Democracy Defenders Fund, which has been helping lead successful national court fights against the Trump administration and has helped secure multiple landmark orders against authoritarianism in this important era. He's also a very prominent national speaker on democracy and leads a number of other nonprofit efforts. But with that, I'd love to turn it over to Norm to give us a little bit of a sense of what's at stake in the next couple of weeks.
Thanks, Quentin. So great to be with you and friends. So wonderful to see folks from all over the country as we prepare for the critically important elections in 2025. You'll hear about in detail the races in New Jersey and Virginia. And I'm going to reflect on those a little bit in the context of the larger battle for our democracy. I'm just back from meeting with global democracy activists in Europe. We all gathered in Prague, where I was a diplomat, a city that has seen the ups and downs of democracy over the past 100 years plus, and the devastating effects that can happen when authoritarianism sets in. The consensus was that the United States has joined the ranks of backsliding democracies. The technical term among the political scientists is competitive authoritarian regimes, where you still have the modalities of democracy, but you have to work much harder to defend them. The good news is that here at Democracy Defenders Fund, with a wonderful and large coalition of partners, we have been fighting to protect our elections, our democracy, and winning. It's harder than it should be. What we have seen from President Trump is a commitment to attacking the rule of law and attacking our elections that give legitimacy to the choices of the American people and to the system of American democracy. We've been very privileged to push back on some of the worst of those attacks, and I want to reflect a little bit on what we are facing from this administration, how it's likely to manifest itself in New Jersey and Virginia, and what effective pushback looks like. We were very proud to represent LULAC, the lead plaintiff, with a great coalition of other plaintiffs and other democracy organizations. When the White House sought to impose its control over American elections with an elections executive order that included things like demanding proof of citizenship for those who vote, baseless claims of fraud, and in fact our systems work fine, and demanding additional credentials in a system that isn't broken, that has almost no voter fraud, is just a burden on the right to vote. We went to court, we litigated, we made the point that the Constitution does not entrust the president with these responsibilities. They're given over supervising elections. They're given to the states, some responsibilities for Congress, almost none to the president and the executive branch. And the judge agreed with us and our wonderful partners and enjoined that executive order. Nevertheless, we're still seeing efforts to control American elections. Just yesterday in New Jersey, you saw the New Jersey GOP writing the Department of Justice requesting that it oversee mail-in ballots in Passaic County, which has a large Latino population. There is no legal role for the Department of Justice in administering elections whatsoever. But we need to prepare for this kind of federal overreach. If we want to forecast what's happening, you can look at another New Jersey example, and we've been very proud to, again, lead successful pushback on that. When Donald Trump sent his former personal attorney, Alina Habba, to New Jersey, she overtly referenced changing the partisan orientation of that state and posed a direct threat to elections in that state. Once again, we went to court. You can feel very good about the rule of law. And it doesn't matter which judges, it turns out, which judges you have, whether they were appointed by Democratic presidents or by Republican presidents, because they all object to the shenanigans. We went to court. We pointed out that Alina Habba was illegally appointed because under the applicable statute, Donald Trump only gets one appointment 120 days after that appointment runs, and he had made another appointment. The judges of New Jersey picked the U.S. attorney, not Alina Habba, with the risk that she will interfere in elections. And the New Jersey federal courts disqualified Alina Habba. That issue is at the Third Circuit, was just argued this week, and we are fighting on that front as well. What are the kind of things that we may see Donald Trump attempt to do in New Jersey, in Virginia, or that we may see election deniers and election saboteurs do in those states? You can look no further than frivolous actions just down the road from Virginia in North Carolina, where one candidate clearly won a Supreme Court race in the last cycle, but through a series of bogus post-election legal maneuvers, they attempted to deny the candidate her rightful place on the North Carolina Supreme Court. I'm pleased to say that's another place. Again, we do this with the big democracy coalition, and we're so fortunate to have the Voter Protection Corps as a part of that coalition. We went to court and said, no, we are not going to allow you, through bogus challenges, contests, recounts, litigation, we're not going to allow you to steal, to purloin this seat when the voters made a clear choice. So those are the kinds of things that we're watching for in Virginia, in New Jersey. I'm pleased to tell you that democracy advocates in those states, and you'll hear from some great ones today about the detailed lay of the land, always led by the state and local folks who know the situation best, but joining with the national organizations, building a deep bench, including at the Democracy Defenders Fund. We are ready with that state and local leadership to put the voices and the votes of the people of those states first, to defend free and fair elections, to speak up in the court of law. Don't neglect, as you get ready for what lies ahead, the court of public opinion, the flow of disinformation, the new and powerful independent media. I'm the publisher of The Contrarian. We take great pride in our coverage of the democracy movement. Our editor-in-chief, Jen Rubin, is one of the most outspoken voices, including interviewing democracy champions in both of these states. And I'm going to say a word about one other state, although it's not strictly on the agenda for tonight. Do that in a moment. Don't neglect the court of public opinion either. It's very important to be outspoken. And again, folks are ready to knock down the disinformation, to speak the truth in the court of public opinion, as well as in the courts of law. So we know that as long as the spirit of election denial, subversion, and sabotage is led by Donald Trump, who still claims he won the 2020 election, as long as his people are in the White House, in the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division taken over by Harmeet Dillon. She was there in court when we defeated that wicked Trump election ZO. We know that the threats, like the threats you'll hear about in the particular states, are there. But the pattern of the Trump administration so far, we alone have 208 legal cases and matters at Democracy Defenders Fund. Courts have stopped Donald Trump over 125 times in our and others' cases, including in the elections and democracy space. We know that the strong pro-democracy pushback, if we all work together, is there in the court of law, in the court of public opinion. Finally, I'll say one P.S. Also, please don't neglect the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, state Supreme Court judicial retention races. Keep a sharp eye on those. That's another place where you could see attempted election interference, and there will be strong response. Thank you for having me. Honored to be here and a part of this coalition with all of you. Quentin, back to
Thank you.
you.
Thank you so much, Norm. So inspiring, and thank you for your leadership. Now I'd love to, the main theme of tonight is a call to action. If you're worried about our democracy, the best way to fight back is to protect the vote in the upcoming elections in key states. I want to build on something that Norm said, which is it's so important for us to support and take the leadership from our wonderful state leaders. And Tram Nguyen is one of the best in the business. She's the co-executive director of the New Virginia Majority. She helped found that organization in 2007 and leads a multiracial, multi-issue campaign using large-scale civic engagement, community organizing, advocacy, leadership development, strategic communications. Her work on democracy, criminal justice, immigrants' rights, climate change, and economic opportunity explores the intersections of social, racial, and economic justice. She's been a wonderful partner to the Voter Protection Corps, and she's here today to let us know what's at stake in the Virginia elections and also how you can get involved in supporting that effort. Tram?
Thanks, Quentin, and thank you all for being here. We are exactly 2 weeks out from the election, so I am counting down the days, although we know that the election day is never our finish line. So gearing up for the second wind after the November election as well. But just quickly, as folks know, Virginia's got big elections this year, as does our friends in New Jersey, who you'll hear from in a little bit. And as Norm mentioned, let's not forget about Pennsylvania and the Supreme Court races there. But quickly on the lay of the land in Virginia. We have been voting for 30 days already. We have 45 days of early voting. So the election protection work has already been underway. So far with early voting, we are outpacing the 2021 gubernatorial early vote numbers. As of yesterday, we are 55%, there are 55% more early votes cast than this time in 2021. So it's a pretty good pace. In the last 30 days, we have not experienced a whole lot of issues, some questions around, from voters, whether or not they're still registered to vote, where they ought to be voting. The first 30 days are a little slow. This coming Saturday will be the first Saturday that every locality will have Saturday voting. This Saturday and next Saturday, which are typically the busiest days of early voting. And so our partners and our election protection volunteers are gearing up to be able to have eyes and ears and boots on the ground during this surge of early voting that's coming up. In terms of like what we're looking at for frontline threats and voter protection needs, I know we're only 2 weeks out. I will not put it past this administration, for folks who are in Virginia who are familiar with our governor and his penchant for purging voters. I feel like every fall of this administration, we get news that X number of voters, X thousands of voters in Virginia have recently been purged. And so, it would not surprise me if, in this week or next week, we get news that, more voters have been purged. And so a lot of our partners are making sure that voters have the information they need to check their voter registration status. They're getting information around same-day voter registration if that's something that they need to take advantage of. We're also doing a lot of absentee ballot curing right now. So a lot of, even though the early vote numbers are a lot higher than this time in 2021, there are also lots of ballots out there that haven't been cured. They have some issue with their return envelope. They might have forgotten to put the last 4 digits of their social security number. There just might be some issue. And so we have folks calling through voters that have been identified as their absentee ballot not having been counted. Registrars are supposed to notify voters within 3 days of receiving, not of receiving, but of opening their ballot, their absentee ballot, processing their absentee ballot, and identifying that it cannot be counted because of a material omission. And so we're trying to make sure that these voters are getting the information back in. Norm mentioned that post-election shenanigans. I mean, this last year, we got wind that electoral board members in the city of Waynesboro decided that they were not going to certify election results no matter what, because they can't physically see the hand count or the ballot counting in the machine, that they didn't trust the machine, and so they weren't going to certify the election results. And so we identified some citizens in Waynesboro and filed a lawsuit and won that lawsuit, but would not put it past folks again this year to sort of think through ways that they can post-election steal or not, honor the results, especially because the elections, the races are tightening up. I think 2 different polls were released today, and it just shows the race tightening up, and things are a lot closer and within the margin of error than I think folks anticipated even last week. And so, I think that there are going to be opportunities for for electoral board members and other folks to sort of think through what they can do to what tools they have to make sure that, the results are what they may want it to be. And so we're monitoring all of that and making sure that we're getting information out to the Voter Protection Corps, to democracy defenders, to all of our partners and national allies who could potentially help with legal support to do that. But I will say, like, all of that, like, knock on wood, we haven't seen major issues this early vote period, and I think that's a good thing. For me, a great election day is if we don't have to deal with a whole lot and it's super, super quiet. But it's also really important, I can't overemphasize this, that we still need to have the voter protection capacity, because through election protection, we're able to identify even like small things that we may want to fix. And it really informs our democracy agenda and our advocacy efforts after the election. So for example, we know, I love our same-day voter registration. I'm so happy and proud that we were able to pass that in 2020 and that we have it. But I also know that it can be tweaked, right? And that there are some flaws within the way that it's being implemented in Virginia. And so hopefully we will have a legislature that is going to be willing to fix some of those things. And so the experiences of voters on election day and what our poll monitors and our poll watchers can capture from voters as they leave the polling place in terms of, oh, well, that line was really long because they were processing things weirdly, or they were asking for this information. Those are all good data points and information for us that we can put those fixes into our legislative agenda and make sure that we are continuing to improve the way elections are administered in Virginia. So even if there aren't shenanigans or any issues, I can't overstate how important it is for us to have the Election Protection Corps of volunteers out there to be our eyes and ears on the ground, to really understand the voter experience, because that's what we're about, right? If we want to make sure that we have free and fair elections, we want to make sure that voters have a good experience doing it, and that if there's anything we can do to fix how our elections are administered, then we can do that. And I'm excited. We have a lot of items on our agenda already, on our democracy agenda, to make sure that Virginia keeps improving. But all of the things that we're hearing from our volunteers on the ground are also important in terms of making sure that we are maximizing the opportunity as much as possible. The Virginia Civic Engagement Table has been a great partner, and they're anchoring a lot of the C3 election protection efforts in Virginia. So for folks who want to plug in, like I said, the eyes and ears on the ground, extremely important. So folks are available throughout this early voting period or on election day to be those eyes and ears on the ground. Sign up. I think that we'll share a link in a little bit. And if you're from out of state and you can't be here on the ground, but you still want to find a way to help support, I know that there will be phone banking opportunities soon to just call through the list of folks that have been recently purged from the voter registration rolls to make sure that they are able to get back on the rolls to vote this year, and phone banking for those curing, for those absentee ballot curing items that we need. So there's a lot that we can do, and I'm hoping that in 14 days we'll have a great, smooth election, and that the only task in front of us is to pass our right to vote constitutional amendment, and to, pass a democracy agenda that'll just continue to improve how elections are run in Virginia, put guardrails on in terms of list maintenance and voter purges, et cetera, and just keep making sure that democracy works for all of us as we go into next year's midterm elections. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Tram. And we will put in the chat some of the ways that you can get involved in the Virginia elections. And Anna from our team will also talk at the end about some ways that you can plug in. But, purge chase, those cure chasing, and some of the on-the-ground election protection are all great opportunities to really help with this vote. And we're just thrilled to have you as a partner and a leader in Virginia on that, and would love to help anybody on this call or watching this on YouTube afterwards, really interested in helping you get plugged in there in Virginia. With that, I'd love to turn to New Jersey, which is another really important election that's coming up in a couple of weeks. And we're thrilled to be joined today by Nuzhat Chowdhury from the New Jersey Institute of Social Justice. She's the Director of Democracy and Justice Program. She comes to the Institute from the Brennan Center for Justice, where she worked as a legal and legislative consultant on projects to reform election administration in New York, and to increase election security across the country. She also worked at the New York City Council, and is a wonderful partner and leader in New Jersey. So Nuzhat, I'd love to turn it over to you to let us know how we can plug in New Jersey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak on this webinar. My apologies, I am taking this call from my car, where it's a very busy season right now, especially in the democracy world. So I'm just running in between meetings. But I think the important thing about New Jersey is that New Jersey is a state that often experiences voter problems and during the elections sort of cyclically year to year. New Jersey is one of the only states, I believe, that has elections every single year. And so this year we have our gubernatorial election, but we also have our entire assembly is also up for re-election. Early voting has not started in New Jersey. We have a much shorter timeline than Virginia. But early voting for New Jersey will be starting this Saturday. Will run from October 25th through November 2nd, although vote by mail has already started. So in the state in general, the state has a very generous vote by mail program. They expanded it in 2021 after the pandemic. It's no excuse vote by mail, but also there's a permanent vote by mail list where folks can sign up if they would like to continue to receive their mail-in ballots every single election cycle. And so that has begun. We haven't heard really anything on the ground from there yet, but that's a program that I think has been used a lot more and is growing since 2020, 2021. The upcoming race, I think is one that has been pretty contentious within the state, just because it is a pretty tight race. Our current governor, Governor Murphy, his term is ended, so we have two completely new candidates. And New Jersey is a state that shifted a bit more during the last election cycle. So in 2024, New Jersey is one of the states that shifted a little bit more to the right than it ever had been, both sort of across the state, but also in places that used to be considered just stronger, like left strongholds. And so I think because of that, tensions are, of course, running high between the two different camps. I don't think that we are anticipating, hopefully, anything particularly egregious. Overall, the elections in New Jersey there don't tend to be anything particularly dramatic, at least to voters on the ground, other than what Norm mentioned earlier. There is something happening in Passaic County. There's a lot of politics that happens, but in terms of actually the voter experience on the ground, we are really plugged into that. And we don't see a ton of actual disruption to the vote during early voting or during election day, which is quite good. But that being said, New Jersey is a state that I think is very uniquely segregated into very Black and brown and communities of color, and to other communities and cities that are just more white, right? And because of that, there are a lot of challenges that New Jersey voters face every single election cycle, but it's faced very disproportionately across the state. Different things in different areas. The places that tend to be very have higher Black and brown populations tend to have the same sorts of problems every single election cycle, and a lot of it, I think, does rise to voter suppression, voter disenfranchisement. So we have a lot of problems with long lines, late poll openings in places like Essex County and Newark and Camden. We have sort of a chronic problem in Jersey City and in the Hudson County area, which again is predominantly people of color. We have a problem with voters being asked for their voter ID. In New Jersey, we don't have any voter ID laws. The only time you need to show any sort of voter ID is if you're voting for the first time or if there's some sort of like a signature mismatch. But we have folks who are asked every single election cycle to show their ID. We have a lot of accessibility issues. We are a state that has very high linguistic diversity, but in terms of what is actually required in terms of language access is not very much across the state. So we have a lot of language access issues, and just general like things that rise to disenfranchisement because folks either can't vote when they think that they're going to vote or when they have time to vote, or they can't, for whatever reason, they can't access the courts through different legal tools. I will say that that's generally speaking, we see a lot of that in places across the state. And then it really seems as though at least one election every single year, there's some sort of a meltdown that happens in one county or another. So last year in Burlington County, which is in southern Jersey, there were lines during the November 2024 election. People were standing in lines there for 6, 7, 8 hours. The courts there was a special request filed. The courts had to extend the polling time past 9 p.m. because people were just in lines for that long. A couple of years ago, there was a total technological meltdown in a different county that was also creating long lines, and folks didn't know how to use provisional ballots. So we have these sort of systemic and one-off problems that also occur. And I think one of the things that we have learned doing our election protection work is that the amount of misinformation and disinformation that arises from these particular incidents, it's truly more than I think you would anticipate. You have a lot of bad faith actors, obviously, in online forums and communities, but also when these sorts of things happen, what we have found is that if there isn't a proper response from, say, the AG's office or from the county that is addressing the issue, that is really going to make sure that folks know that this isn't like something that makes you distrust the process or the government, the voting process rather, that misinformation really spreads very fast. And so we've had a couple of instances where it just has sort of spun out of our control. And those are the kinds of things I think we've found that really heightens distrust in voting. And especially, I would say, among communities that are, for whatever reason, one reason or another, lean toward distrusting the process anyway. So I think that being said, in New Jersey, we do have an election protection coalition. We have a coalition of different partner organizations, and we each sort of take a different piece of the voter protection work. And the goal is to work together during the early voting period and on election day to make sure that voters are getting the help that they need. So we have a social media monitoring program because at least in the past when social media was a bit more functional, people who would be disgruntled at their polling site would go to, Twitter, go to Facebook to post pictures of whatever is happening, to post complaints. That's one resource that we have where we take that information and then we try and solve that issue. We have partners who do litigation the day of. We have partners who run their own voter protection hotline. We have partners that serve particular communities so that folks are out there on the ground helping voters in those areas. And it has worked fairly well. I think in the past few election cycles when we've done this together, we really make sure to keep each other updated on everything that's happening. We make sure to check the database when voter calls come in. And I think every one of us having like a sort of a different piece of the puzzle really helps us work together seamlessly and cover all of the bases. And I think sort of to something that Tram was saying a little earlier, one of the things that we have found that is really, I think, a boon from this particular work, obviously helping voters to make sure that they don't get disenfranchised and making sure that they trust the process. But we are able to use a lot of those stories and a lot of that data to inform our agenda, to make sure that we are able to humanize voting and to really show that New Jersey is a state that has problems, because I think that's one of the issues that you have in a place like New Jersey, where people think that it's a quote unquote blue state, nothing goes wrong. What could possibly, but what policies could we pass to make it even better? And the truth is there are so many different policies that you could pass, but legislators need stories, they need data. Without it, you're just sort of advocating for a policy that they don't necessarily believe in. So we have used a lot of those voting stories to draw out a map of here are all the different places that are facing problems where voters face challenges. And here's why, based on that, we need same-day voter registration, which New Jersey does not have. We need a state voting rights act, which is something that we are trying to get passed during this particular lame duck. And so I think the coalition work, the voter protection work, I think is so important. And of course, like one of the ways in which you can get sort of into this process is to volunteer, to do social media monitoring. If you live in Jersey, we have organizations that do that field work. And all of that, I think, works together to not only make sure that we're protecting voters the day of, but also so that we are collecting those stories of voter disenfranchisement so that we can then advocate for policies to help address those things. So I think that's sort of the lay of the land in New Jersey, and I'll turn it back to Stephen.
Thank you so much,
Question, sorry.
Nuzhat. No, it's great. And thank you for all the work that you're doing. If folks have questions for Nuzhat or for Tram or for Norm, please start putting them in the chat. Next I'm gonna introduce our wonderful Voter Protection Corps campaign manager, Anna Lucas, who joined us recently after serving in the Biden administration at the U.S. Small Business Administration, and she's leading a lot of our campaign-related work, and is here to talk about how you can get plugged into our efforts over the next few weeks, as well as what we're doing to prepare for 2026 and 2028. So, Anna.
Thanks, Quentin, and thanks everybody else for being here tonight. As Quentin mentioned, I'm Anna Lucas. I'm the newest member of the Voter Protection Corps based in Washington, D.C., and have the privilege to work with our partners in New Jersey and Virginia to help sort of add capacity where it's needed this election cycle and looking into 2026, because our friends in Virginia and New Jersey are sort of the canary in the coal mine in terms of what we're looking for in voter suppression, what we can anticipate for next year, what we hope we won't see in real time in the states that are voting this year, but certainly want to take any lessons learned both on what works and what we can anticipate what might not work, and how to sort of best shore ourselves up for that as the 2026 elections cycles starts. And speaking of, for those of you who went through 2024, Nuzhat and Tram also did that. And for those of you that got to like take a break and take a moment to decompress, they did not. They started their work for 2025 right away, and likewise will start their work for 2026 on November 5th of this year. So shout out to Tram and Nuzhat and all the folks on this call who've been doing work when there's no off years. So for the rest of us, we are looking at, from the Voter Protection Corps perspective, we're looking at places where we can add capacity in places where it's needed. We don't expect to, and we know that we don't know the states and the communities as well as the folks who are on the ground and working there. So really, we want to be value add in places where it's needed. For example, Nuzhat mentioned there's a lot of mis and disinformation around voting, just sort of like how to cast a ballot, if you have a mail-in ballot, how that works, when it has to be turned in. In Virginia, if you're on the rolls and you get taken off, you may not know that you're no longer on the voting rolls. You may go to cast a ballot and find out in that moment. And so being able to kind of troubleshoot in real time and combating, I mean, voting, there are barriers to voting as it is, and with mis and disinformation, it makes it even harder. So one of the things that Voter Protection Corps is doing is working with an expert in the field of sort of combating mis and disinformation, specifically around voting in communities where they're more prevalent to get these messages. And unfortunately, sometimes when they work, their votes are suppressed, or there's just, it makes it a little bit harder. And in some cases, that means folks won't vote at all. And so we are working with both our friends in Virginia and New Jersey to put together some materials for their coalition members, some of their volunteers who would be willing to be able to do this, on sort of how to spot mis and disinformation, what to do about it, and kind of help put good, accurate information out there to kind of combat against what we know is unfortunately kind of making the rounds both on social media and otherwise. We are working with an expert who actually may be in the audience tonight, Raylan Robeson, who is helping kind of tailor these, hey Raylan, helping tailor these materials for kind of what each of the states need, specifically things that they are already seeing or things that they can anticipate, knowing that there's unique voter suppression efforts happening in 2025 that we can only expect to happen in 2026. Similarly, we're working with some legal advice, and VPC is working with both a legal team that has some pro bono lawyers to help do some voter analysis. So post elections this year, we'll be taking a look at some things that have happened, again, on the good or the bad side, doing some analysis there, writing up some recommendations for things that we can look forward to in 2026 to make sure that we have early protections in place, types of things that we can be doing to work with local board of election staff and officials to make sure they're well versed in this, and making sure that there's everything we can be doing as early as we can to prepare for 2026, and making sure that when the midterms in every state happen and the District of Columbia, that we are as well prepared as we can be. So, and we'll have ways for you to get involved as well. So if you want to be kept apprised of opportunities to volunteer, we've talked about some ways you can get involved this year already in both Virginia and New Jersey. We have some links we can drop in the chat. We can drop my email into the chat. I'm happy to respond and connect you with folks if you're in person and you want to go boots on the ground. If you are remote in a different state and want to be helpful that way, we got options for you. And Voter Protection Corps will be into next year also looking for ways to engage with you and your constituencies to make sure that there's a lot of good information going out there and that folks are a part of something positive as we're looking to midterms in 2026. So let me know if there's anything that you want to do to get involved, both this year and looking forward. And we stand ready to help. We stand ready to help our partners in 2025, and we stand ready to help in 2026 as we hope we'll have a smooth midterm election. So with that, I will turn it back to Quentin because I think we'll have some time for Q&A from folks in the chat and maybe in the audience.
Thank you so much, Anna, and we're so lucky to be working with you. So, I mean, the bottom line here is this is a call to action. This is a time to get involved. If you want to get involved, one great way to do that is to reach out directly to Anna, Anna at voterprotectioncorps.org, and we'll help you plug you into in-person options, to remote options, to helping to protect the vote in 2025 and beyond. So with that, what I'd love to do is start taking some questions from the chat and directing them to our wonderful panel. Our executive director, Jesse Littlewood, is with us and has been looking at the chat. So maybe I'll see if Jesse has any questions that he wants to pose.
Yes, thanks everybody for attending and for your good questions. I've been seeing some questions coming in before, during, and after or this event in the chat and before. If Ambassador Eisen is still with us, I have a question for him, although he may have had to drop off. So we'll see if he's still available. There is one question in the chat from Sarah that we'll route to Tram and Nuzhat, which is, what is being done for those states that have voter ID laws to ensure that everyone is able to have the correct ID and be able to make their voices heard? That is the first sort of big question that we'd be interested in hearing.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think we and our partners have been doing a lot of voter education work. So when we're on the doors, we have one of our wall cards includes information about all of the requirements to voting, including information about the ID requirements. And if you don't have an ID, it's okay. You can sign an affirmation. There have been some partners that are also doing digital campaigns. And then again, just to the earlier point of why poll watchers are so important is that during this early voting period, we did actually find out some information in terms of how ID requirements are being treated differently in different localities. In some places, voters were told just to go home and get their ID and then come back versus like informing them that they can sign the statement. And so it was a quick call to the registrar saying, hey, your chief's in this place, they're doing this wrong. You got to fix this practice. We found out that in Charlottesville and Albemarle County, where UVA is, UVA has digital student IDs, right? So their student IDs are not, physical cards. They've reverted to digital. And so the registrars there were accepting the UVA digital ID, but other student digital IDs, because other universities have also started to incorporate this, were not being accepted. And so that was another thing that we were able to learn and advocate because of our poll watchers. And so, we're trying to do as much as we can to make sure that as many IDs are being accepted as possible. And so that's the advocacy with the registrars, but then also doing a public information and public education campaign to make sure that the public knows that, these are all the different things that are being accepted now. And if you don't have one, that's okay too. You don't have to go home and find something. You can actually just sign a statement saying you are who you are and cast a regular ballot.
That's great. Tram, while I have you here, I want to follow up with a separate question that I've heard, which is a worry about Virginia and the potential for violence at the polling place, given the open carry law. And should we be concerned, or what should we be telling people or know about that possibility in Virginia? And I'm going to add on one more, which is there a particular hotline or number that we should be telling folks if we have family and friends in the state on how to communicate with the voter protection world?
Yeah. So it's a balance between how much you want to, prepare folks for potential violence versus like not necessarily scaring them away from showing up at the polls, right? And so this has come up in the conversations a lot, even with, so Virginia right now, ICE has, had a huge presence in Virginia. I think of the ICE arrests were one of the largest in terms of numbers of ICE arrests in the country. And so there have been questions around what happens if ICE shows up at the polling place on election day as like a huge deterrent. And so, our response to that so far has been, well, let's encourage as many of our immigrant, Latinos, et cetera, folks who are eligible to vote, like let's do the early voting, right? And so we're doing a lot of the scenario planning, and our volunteers are being trained on how to engage, like how to respond in the instance of violence or presence of, ICE or law enforcement. But we're not necessarily like doing a public education alert kind of thing, because we don't want to inadvertently tell folks, oh my gosh, you should expect all of this craziness, and therefore scaring people away from actually turning out to vote. So it's a delicate balance. And so, I don't know if we've got it exactly right. And, we're adjusting in real time as needed. But again, knock on wood, so far, there hasn't been many issues. I mean, last year we had one of the militia folks in Lynchburg. They actually staged a muster about 100 yards away from an early voting location. And so like we were, again, didn't want to alert too many people around that, but like we're very closely monitoring like what they were doing in terms of this muster and this exercise that they were engaging in. So yeah, it's a balance. And your second question around what hotline, I mean, we're pointing everybody to 1-866 Our Vote, the nonpartisan election protection hotline. As I said before, the Civic Engagement Table has been running a robust election protection program here for over a decade. Lawyers are on that call, volunteers. All of that information it's a good central place to collect all of that information so that we can respond appropriately as needed.
Thanks so much. Nuzhat, if you're available, I have some questions that are directed your way. I know that you're perhaps on the road, but if you're free, the questions that have come in regarding New Jersey, one has to be around the idea that New Jersey seems like a prime target for MAGA vote suppression because of its blue state nature. And are you seeing any evidence of that kind of increased disinformation or potential vote suppression? If you could speak to that and what it's like in the state, and if you're seeing any increase intensity, we'd appreciate hearing your thoughts from it. Although, there you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna stay off camera just because it's very dark here now. But yeah, I think in general, what I have found through our social media monitoring is that New Jersey, for some reason, I can venture a guess. It's because a lot of New Jersey folks have since moved down to Florida. But what I found through my social media monitoring is there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation about New Jersey and its races in particular that for some reason comes from folks in other states. And the one I've really found the most is people in Florida. So I've seen misinformation, disinformation about some of the things that I mentioned have happened, like the Burlington County lines a few years ago when Mercer County had their like total like Dominion voting meltdown. I see a lot of that being spread sort of like wildfire on Twitter, on Facebook, really trying to sow distrust in the integrity of the voting process. But what we have also seen in the past is that folks will get like text messages with a lot of misinformation, trying to get people to either stay at home. I think this was something, there was like a text chain that went around. I don't remember if it was 2020. It was at least a couple of years ago, but they were texting people trying to say that it would be really dangerous at the polls and you should stay home, stay safe. I know that that's happened in the past. People have gotten text messages or even mailers saying that the election day is on a different day, or that they are no longer registered to vote, or that their polling location has moved and it's a different polling location than it truly is. I haven't seen anything like that happen yet. We're hoping that it will be a pretty smooth election, but that's wishful thinking sometimes. But since early voting doesn't start for us until this Saturday, I'm assuming that anything in that regard that is going to happen will amp up next week. But I mean, even before this past election, even before this election, there have been a lot of those efforts, I think, to mislead voters and just have them stay away from the polls.
That's fascinating and disturbing, and hopefully we don't see those kinds of challenges. If we do, or to get ahead of it, what is the information we should be sending to family or friends in New Jersey? Or is there, again, a single hotline that we want to direct people towards, or a real trusted source of information around voting rules, procedures, and what is and isn't accurate?
Yeah, so we also work with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. We urge everyone to use 866 Our Vote. We usually have posters around at different polling sites so that voters know that that is the hotline to call. And we work very closely with them to patch through anything that voters might be facing that the hotline volunteers can't address on their end. So the coalition works very closely with the AG's office in New Jersey, with the Secretary of State's office in New Jersey, and we ourselves will call different counties and different boards of elections if something is happening that is, causing problems for voters. And they work very closely with us to make sure that they are addressing those issues. So definitely 866 Our Vote. New Jersey, I believe it's the Department of Elections, Division of Elections, sorry. The Secretary of State's office and the Division of Elections actually has a very comprehensive website that we have in the past worked with to make sure that there's all of the information up there. It has the timeline of deadlines for registration, when mail-in ballots have to be in, all of the different ways to vote, a lot of different questions around voting and the processes can be answered on that website. But the Institute also has a lot of that information on our vote website, which is njisj.org/vote.
Great. Well, thank you all both for that. I have a couple of quick wrap-ups as we have about 1 minute left here to take us out. Thank you very much to all of our speakers for not just joining today, but for the incredible gift of your time on this call, but also your work protecting voters in the states and working to make sure we have free and fair elections. We are really appreciative of putting time and effort into that. And thank you everyone on this call who also joined to get the download on what is happening in the next big statewide elections this November in New Jersey and Virginia, and is able to take this information, the momentum and the resources forward, and make sure we are all standing up for free and fair elections and giving every voter an opportunity to have their voice heard. I'm going to leave a few last call to action opportunities here. If you're an experienced hand in voter protection, feel free to join the National Voter Protection Corps, which is this network of alumni of voter protection work, both on the C3 side, but also on the partisan side. We are providing the kind of resources to the states that Anna talked about in coordination with them. If you're in Virginia or you want to do some remote work in Virginia as they get that ramped up, that would be at the Virginia Election Protection Network. There's also financial support to any of the organizations that are listed here. When it comes to the very specific volunteer opportunities in Virginia, again, protectthevoteva.org. But we know that there is a robust program there for voter advocates, legal advocates, and folks holding informational signs and resources both in neighborhoods but outside of polling places. That's the sign team. And there are upcoming remote volunteering opportunities that we believe will be coming online soon. So these are your chances to get involved. This election is not one to sit out. It is one to dive into and get involved. And thank you for everyone who joined us today as a speaker or as an attendee, and will be out there in the next couple of weeks to make sure we are protecting voters. Thank you for all your good work. And thank you again, everyone, and good night.